everybody, and we are back. This is a special edition of the Duke London podcast. I am partnering with Artists for Artists over the next 4 weeks to bring you the Artists for Artists Digital Spring Stage. So over the next 8 weeks, actually, we're going to bring a variety of artists and a variety of different content to our online platforms. Over the next 4 weeks, we've got the collaboration with me, the Duke London. We're going to have 4 different guests and maybe a few callers later on, depending on who's around. And yeah, we're just going to be talking about a variety of different topics here, and then it's going to continue on with different types of content after this. So keep an eye on the Artists for Artists website, which is www.artistforartists.co.uk. If you don't know anything about Artists for Artists, they were founded in 2016. They're a trailblazing initiative activating artist and sector change for the UK hip-hop dance company. Known for their provocative and inclusive conversations, Artists for Artists collaboration with the Duke London hopes to reactivate conversations that have since been paused by the COVID-19 pandemic. So that's why we're here today. And I'm here with the lovely first guest, Michelle Norton. Hi, Michelle.
Hi.
How's it going?
Good.
How are you? How's things?
I'm pretty good. I mean, I've had to travel from South to East London, but I'm pretty good.
Fair. How's Corona been affecting you in life? Has it been trouble or you been all right?
I mean,
everyone's had some variation of trouble.
I mean, obviously, there's a kind of, there's a restrictions on our everyday life and having to adjust to that. And obviously working in the theatre.
Yeah.
It's been, It's kind of taken its toll. I mean, we're going into like nearly a year of it. So I think in that sense, it's affected me on a work level. I think in the everyday life sense, I think I just try and keep my focus elsewhere. And it's almost like I don't watch the news. I kind of just listen to what I need to do in regards to work and health as well. So my focus is on, keeping my mind and my physical being kind of healthy.
Yeah, and I think that's a really amazing thing, like especially now after a year, because it's like I feel like everyone I know has gone through both stages one way or the other. So I know a lot of people at the beginning were like, I'm great, I'm killing it, I'm going to learn new skills, I'm going to work out every day. And then those people are now like a bit stressed or they're like, okay, it's a bit long now. Or the people that, I'm one of these people that at the beginning I was more stressed and I kind of just sat on the sofa doing nothing and I was like, this is weird, I don't know what to do. But now I'm a lot more motivated. But it's like everyone's kind of, no one's been able to sustain happiness for like a whole year. It's been like, which I think, is in a way is good because it's like, for me anyway, it's like to know that everyone's gone through some dips at some point. It doesn't make me feel so, because at the beginning I was a bit like, oh man, I'm not like, there's people working out, there's people working hard, learning new skills, and I'm not doing anything. So now I'm kind of a bit like, all right, we've all gone through the same process, just in different ways,
I think in the beginning, I kind of felt like it was a good excuse to slow down.
Yeah.
I think as the human race, I think we all, well, not all, but in the Western worlds, we needed to slow down. So I think it was a great opportunity. I think in the beginning, it was that thing of like, okay, now I've slowed down. Now I can concentrate on the things that I've always wanted to do. And I remember reading this really good tweet, and it was this person was like saying, everyone's like now realised that all of the things that they thought they were too busy to do, now they've realised that maybe they never ever wanted to do it. I was like, that's quite humorous.
Yeah, that it's like it's more the business was an excuse.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think that's true as well. But let's take a step back and let's introduce you for anyone that doesn't know you. I just wanted to have a nice chat to begin with.
Yeah, cool.
So Michelle Norton, tell me, who are you? How do you, I always ask people this and it's always like different the way they interpret it, but how do you sum yourself up? If I said like, who is Michelle in relation to the industry, how do you see yourself and how would you describe yourself?
Okay, so I am, in the sense of the industry, I am the head of Breakin Convention, which for people that don't know, Breakin Convention is an international hip-hop dance festival. That's how we kind of started. We're also known now as like kind of very important in the sense of like professional development for hip hop artists, not just dance artists, across the board. And And obviously we do the international festival, we tour. We are opening a hip hop academy in 2023 in East London.
That's really cool.
So that's my kind of what I am, I guess, how I sit in the industry now.
And do you work anywhere else in the industry, like outside of Breakin Convention? Or does that kind of suck up all your time?
It takes up a lot of time.
Yeah, I bet.
A lot of time. And I've been there from the beginning since 2004. So
yeah,
it's a lot of time. And I kind of went from a volunteer to a coordinator to a program, you know what I mean? So I've kind of moved through the ranks and now.
Yeah, definitely wanted to talk to you about that because, so break this down for me because I don't know quite where, when you say the head of Breakin Convention, so are you technically Jonzi's boss?
No, he calls me boss, but I'm not his boss.
So where, like, let's say in the hierarchy of...
I guess I'm almost like, probably like Jonzi's right-hand woman.
Right, okay,
kind of thing in the sense of, he's the artistic director, I'm the head of Breakin Convention. I mean, we kind of like, the thing is with Breakin Convention, in a lot of organisation, it's like this kind of hierarchy.
Yeah.
But we really feel like we're kind of equal across the team.
It's more the title that is like that.
And we consider ourselves a family. Mm-hmm. So a lot of things we discuss together, a lot of ideas come from throughout the team. You know what I mean? So
it's not that sort of thing where you're like, no, Jonzi, we're doing this.
No.
Fair enough.
I mean, I'm bossy, but
So you're the head of Breakin Convention, but so what you were just saying is you started as a volunteer on Breakin Convention.
Yeah.
How long ago was that? 2004?
2004.
So talk me through that process. Like, when you volunteered, were you like, I'm taking over? Or did you know where you were going to end up, or how did that happen?
So when I volunteered, I'd gone to university in my late 20s to early 30s as a mature student. And I was studying arts management. And then part of that, you had to obviously volunteer and get work experience in arts organisations. Yeah. So I've known Jonzi since we were since I was 16, because he's a year, 2 years older than me.
Okay.
So I'll go through the whole history of like hip hop. Yeah. In the sense of,
but
how
also
we
that's, I guess, speaks about the family aspect.
Yeah.
It's like, of course, like you guys are going to work as a team if you've known each other since you were 16. That's also great.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't see each other all the, you know what I mean, throughout, but we knew each other from sort of 16 from like clubbing days and being in the West End, and, you know, everyone kind of knew each other from sort of partying. Yeah. And going to Covent Garden. So you just knew, you know what I mean, we all kind of knew each other.
Yeah.
So a mutual friend was kind of like helping on the kind of production of the first Breakin Convention.
Nice.
And then basically asked me if I, Jonzi, he's doing this festival at Sadler's Wells, and will, you know what I mean, you come and help out. So I basically just rocked up on the first day and was just like, yeah, I'm here to help.
What do you want from me?
I'm here to help.
But it was more a thing of like, you just lending a hand rather than thinking about career or anything.
Yeah. And then obviously the very first Breakin Convention for me, I mean, obviously coming through it and being in Covent Garden at like sort of 12, 13 years old up to sort of like 15 years old, it really felt like it had brought me back to the 80s when I went to the first Breakin Convention, because it was like the graph in the building, it was the DJs, it was, you know what I mean, obviously the dancing, it was just everything was there, and I hadn't really experienced that since the 80s in that kind of...
At this point when you first came, was there someone else doing the job that you're doing now, or was it Jonzi doing everything?
No, so at the time it was obviously Jonzi, who was the artist and the creator of it. And then there was Emma, who's still there. Okay. Emma Ponsford.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Emma Dowden.
Yeah.
At the time. And she was working at Sadler's Wells in the programming department. And then there was Kate Scanlon, who was working in education at the time at Sadler's Wells. But there wasn't Breakin Convention wasn't the way it is now. So it wasn't an all-year organisation.
Got you.
It was just a festival that happened.
So they didn't technically need your position yet?
No.
Right.
So it wasn't until 2008 that it became an all-year-round organisation.
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah.
Because my first one was 2007.
Yeah.
I don't think I even knew. I knew of it as a kind of institution in the UK at that point, but I didn't know it wasn't.
It was just a festival that happened once a year.
Interesting.
And 2007 was the first time that we toured nationally, so it was just, So even in 2007, I was brought in 2006 to help with the first national tour. So then I was actually working at Sadler's Wells a couple of days a week.
So
help with that.
2004, you were just a volunteer.
Just came in and volunteered at the weekend.
2005, did that happen
I
again?
called up again and just said, "Oh yeah, do you remember me?
Yeah. Need a hand?
Do you need my help?"
Yeah, you know that Breakin Convention thing. You need a hand with it. And then
So then up 2006, they called me
Right.
to come and help, and I just was then paid for that weekend. And then later in 2006 October, I was then brought in to kind of help with planning for the first national tour.
So that was kind of like, I guess, the combination of the fact that you've been around and shown your willingness to help out, but also that you had some expertise with your degree and stuff like that, right?
Degree, just knowing the culture.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Because I think what I think maybe a lot of people, younger people, I think the questions they have or the things that they're not sure about is like, how would you, if you're not already Michelle Norton, how do you interview to be Michelle Norton? Do you know what I mean? It's like, and if you just start, it's like, where's that balance? Because I think, yes, you can volunteer every year for a festival and they still may not take you, it still may not happen for you. So I guess it's like finding that perfect balance of like, you've got the degree, you know the culture, you've got the willingness to help out, and it kind of all mixes up, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, with any kind of profession in life, especially when it comes to like media, entertainment, the arts, it's always, there's a little bit of luck involved.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've done, like in the past, I've done quite a few talks to university students, and I always, my main thing that I used to lead with was like volunteer.
Right.
Like you need to get your foot in the door. So you have to volunteer. If you don't have the contacts, if you don't whatever, you have to just be like knocking on doors and volunteering. And not only, there's one thing of like going into any organization or, company and just say, okay, I'm going to volunteer. But you have to make a mark. You have to go above and beyond. You can't just be like, oh, well, I'm here. And maybe I'm nice and maybe they'll like me. It's like, no, you have to be like almost a thing of like, we need you because you are you are valuable. You're adding something.
Yeah. I guess because I guess also the other side of that conversation that I hear a lot is the kind of young people being told to know their worth and not work for free. Like we have it all the time with like music videos and stuff where people are just getting asked to do music videos for free and they're doing it because it's a big artist, and then the older dancers are like, you shouldn't have done that, you're ruining the industry. And I guess for them, I can imagine being a younger dancer and being like, I want to volunteer, I want to get my foot in the door without necessarily having to be hired, but I also want to know my worth and not be like throwing away my time, which it is our most valuable resource in a lot of places. Yeah. And especially if they're good and they are willing to make a mark, it's like if that company then doesn't hire you, feel a bit like used, I guess. Yeah. So I guess it's that balance of maybe for them like knowing like, okay, but when do I say, all right, enough is enough. If you're not going to hire me, I have to stop volunteering. Do you know what I mean? Like what would you say about that?
I think this is where you've got to use, I think anything in life, you got to use discernment. So you have to kind of weigh up. There's going to be a job that it's almost like, okay, if I do this job, I may get seen by this whatever. You have to weigh up what is the cost. And sometimes it's not always a financial thing. Sometimes it is the value. The value of doing something is much more than any kind of payment could have been. And I think you have to then kind of sit with your own self and your gut to be like, okay, I know this, it might not make a difference in my, in my pocket today, but I'm looking at my future. Yeah. And you have to look at the kind of stepping stones. It's like, if I get into this circle of people, I'm going to connect. It's how do I then use that opportunity, even if I'm not being paid? Yeah. So you can't, not every job is the same. Do you know what I mean? You have to look at the value of like, what if I'm doing this, what am I doing it for? Is it for the experience because I just need to gain experience of doing videos? Is it because it's for this company or for this artist and it's going to get me seen by this amount of people? Or is it just, even especially if it's anything creative, it's like your passion. So if it doesn't sit well, but it's like, okay, this is like a fat paycheck, you know why you're doing it. Yeah. Because it's going to allow me to then go and do the things that I probably won't get paid for, but it's going to do this for me. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's an individual thing.
Yeah, and I think weighing that up for yourself is really important. Like there's at 31 and like I'm kind of living freelance off my art stuff. There's still a lot of stuff I would do for free, and not even if we take like the money side or the career side, but even putting both of those away, there's some projects that are just so dope that like if someone was like, oh, I don't have any budget, I'm like, forget it, I'll do it for free. Like it's fine, like because that's really cool and I want to do it. But again, it's like what you're saying is like if I know I'm there because this project is super cool, like that's why I'm there. It's just fun to be involved, and I need to make sure I'm having fun on the project. If I'm there for the money, I need to make sure the money's right. If I'm there for the career advancements, I need to make sure that people are seeing something that's going to make them want to advance me, I guess.
Yeah.
So I think it's maybe thinking about offering like if you had a product, like Nike make a new shoe and they send a few out to like athletes or something, test these out, see what you think. It's like that. You're like, here, Breakin Convention, test out Michelle Norton, see what you think. It's like, and then they're going to be like, oh no, we want more of this. How much do we need to pay you to keep you here? And if you stay there forever, they're never going to have an incentive to pay you. So I think it is a tough balance, but that's cool that that's worked. So that's not just like you volunteered and then got a job. It's like you volunteered, got a job, got another job, got a higher job, and now you're like up there. So do you feel like it was when you first started kind of, let's say, getting paid from Breakin Convention and actually like employed, were you like, oh yeah, I want to stick around? Or were you still a bit like, yeah, we'll see what happens?
I mean, there was a time, just going back to like not getting paid and whatever else, but there was a time, I think for the first maybe 3 or 4 years, I remember actually saying to someone like, I would do this for free.
Really?
Because
so it was one of those
projects.
projects.
I believed in it so much. And I mean, I believed in it so much. And Emma and John Z and even Kate would, because I used to be like, even when we became an all year round organisation, I'd be like, world domination, because it's almost like I saw the potential in it, and I guess I saw a future and what it could be. So for me, I was invested. I think that's another thing, is like when you're really invested or you believe in something. And the reason why I've stayed at Breakin Convention this long was definitely not in the earlier days, even when I was getting paid, because I was getting paid like, you know what I mean, not much. And I was a single parent raising a child. So I could have gone like to loads of places and got paid much more money. But I believed in that organisation.
That's a real belief. Like that's not just like, I don't know, I'm a rich kid like messing about on the like you're a single parent. Like no, but like, I mean, you know what I mean? Like you're a single parent. And at the time when it's like, this is not like I'm not, you're not pre-uni just having a Sunday job. It's like you're like, this is the time when I need to be working on my career. So for you, that was your gamble of like, nah, this is going to be the one, but it's still a gamble, I guess, at that point, Yeah,
definitely.
But that's that's really cool, and it's nice to know that like backstory, I guess. I think the other thing with Breakin Convention that I find interesting is that what's the deal? I guess I don't have a better way to say that, but like, what's the deal with saddlers? Like, how does it work with saddlers? Where does Breakin Convention fit? Because for those that don't, actually, I'll let you explain. For those that don't know,
so we are part of Saddlers Wells. I guess we kind of sit within the sort of programming department.
Okay.
And I think what it was in 2007, 2008, when the Arts Council weren't kind of like, they weren't willing to, or I wouldn't say willing, but they weren't funding any new NPOs.
Okay.
So it was a kind of like knowing
what's an NPO, just for the audience if they don't know?
A national portfolio organisation.
Okay.
So now, like, obviously, Zoo Nation is one.
Yeah.
Boy Blue.
There's like 5, wasn't there, that got that status?
There's Avant Garde, Boy Blue, Zoo Nation. I'm not sure what the other ones.
Breakin Convention and someone else.
It wasn't. So Breakin Convention is not an NPO.
Oh, they're not?
They're not.
Right, okay.
We're not.
Right.
So we are still part of, our funding comes through Saddlers Wells to fund Breakin Convention.
And
to exist.
Saddlers are an NPO?
Yeah.
Right, so you're under their umbrella as an NPO, but you're actually not classed as one.
We're not an NPO, no.
Interesting. Okay, cool. Right.
They have kind of almost like ring-fence funding that we exist within Saddlers Wells.
And what was it that made them include Breakin Convention as, because I guess they have a lot of, it's one thing to be like, oh yeah, because Breakin Convention's dope, but like there's a lot of dope things that Saddlers Wells, do you know what I mean? And there's a lot of amazing choreographers and amazing companies that go through there. So what is it that made Breakin Convention as a festival be like, no, we need to include this as our organisation as opposed to just something that comes every year?
I think one, it was a success.
Yeah.
2, it's the most diverse thing that they do at Saddlers Wells. It brings in the most diverse audience.
Yeah.
And and you know, and obviously it's not something that they have to kind of within the existing Sadler's Wells needs to think about. Oh, we also need to try and do this or run this ourselves. There's a team within Sadler's Wells, you know what I mean, that kind of run Breakin Convention that are very, you know what I mean, that's within Breakin Convention, it's not a bunch of people that are just like, oh yeah, we've just kind of happened to kind of stumble upon hip hop and it's really cool and this is fun. Yeah. And all of the people that work in Breakin Convention are part of the culture. They're very, you know what I mean, the culture is within them. So, you know, I mean, even Emma doesn't come from a hip hop background, but she just loves it, but loves it in the sense of like what it kind of brings. But, you know, without trying to kind of now like, oh, now I like hip hop. Now I'm now hip hop. She's very kind of respectful in the sense of it's not her thing, but she's very kind of like, you know, she's a big supporter. Yeah.
And also like have a few brief conversations with Emma. I think she comes across as a very like, I don't mean this to sound like, but like intelligent person. Like, of course she's intelligent to be in the job that she's in, but in the sense of like, even the intricacies of like some of the pieces that we've discussed and stuff, she'll say, and I'm like, oh, that's like, you're really like looking beyond the like, oh, it was really exciting, you know, so she's really like understanding the nuances of these things. So I can imagine that from her as well.
But she's brilliant. And then she's just like, so I might just want to just say words I'm not meant to say. But, you know, she's like really ish hot at things like budgets, you know what I mean? She just like, she's the Excel queen.
Oh yeah, I think we can swear.
I call her the Excel queen. Yeah. And then she loves budgets and she's that kind of like nerdy, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And things like the funding side of things and whatever, she's just like, she's really up on it. So in that kind of side, she's very like logistically, she's just on point.
Yeah.
And then she just has this real admiration and just support and love for what we do as an organisation. And then, you know, there's like Dave Flav.
Yeah, good old Dave.
Who, you know, was doing too much flavour before even we, you know what I mean, nabbed him.
Yeah.
And he's just, you know what I mean, he just, you know, he used to be a dancer.
Yeah.
Loves hip hop, is, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just clued up on everything digital and also a good filmmaker. And then Karine, who's our coordinator, she studied at East London University. She did the urban degree. But, you know, she volunteered for us a couple of times and then is now, you know what I mean, works with us four days a week. But, you know, she's done a master's in like hip hop and education.
Amazing.
She's really important for the development of the Hip Hop Academy and just loves hip hop. Yeah. And then Shay D, who is our education coordinator. She is an MC. Yeah. She's an artist. She does amazing youth work. But it's just an amazing like hip hop artist, female rapper, you know what I mean, Iranian.
Yeah.
And that's another thing, just our kind of cultural mix. You know what I mean? I'm black. I'm probably one of the few black leaders in the arts, but also to be like the head of a hip hop company within Sadler's Wells, it's like pretty big.
Yeah, well,
you know what I mean. So
yeah, I definitely wanted to get onto that. So like, this is such a broad question, but like, we'll get more intricate as we go. But like, how has your experience been like being a black woman? Kind of, I guess, getting to that status where you're at. Like, what is the perspective? Like, how is there stuff that like? I mean, there obviously is going to be stuff, but like me as like a white guy, like I would never even think of like, oh shit, Michelle had to deal with this or whatever. Like, and the other question on this note as well is I'm interested to know, and again, say as much as you can or want to professionally, but like, what was it like around the Black Lives Matter movement this summer working in Sadler's? Because my assumption would be, again, you take this in a different direction if I'm prying too much. My assumption would be somewhere like Sadler's would immediately run to the strong black female lead of a hip hop organization and be like, help fix this. Like, what do we do? How will we make ourselves look good kind of thing? Because it's like an institution like Sadler's. That would be my assumption. But like maybe, you know, what was the inner workings kind of like with all that? So it's a broad question, but...
Where do you want me to start?
Let's start with the Black Lives Matter this summer, George Floyd movement.
Okay. I mean, yeah. I mean, obviously, all of last year was really heavy, and it was almost like from COVID to then that happened, and obviously being a Black person in general, it just kind of felt like this is so overwhelming. It's like already we're just dealing with all of this pandemic stuff, and now this,
and that's in your personal life before it even gets to the professional.
Yeah, and it kind of felt, because it wasn't obviously just sad as well. So I think because of what was happening and we were at home, it was almost like this magnifying glass now was just like, all of a sudden, wow, there's racism. It's like, it's been there.
Yeah.
And then, you know, obviously everyone was like this kind of solidarity. We're all in solidarity. And it was just like, okay, now.
Yeah.
So even, I think a lot of Black and brown people kind of went in before even we were approached. And even, I think, like, all right, let's be white people within the organization, I think was already kind of like, okay, how do we deal with this? And you could sense that. And I mean, I'm all about energy, so I can sense that anyway.
Yeah.
But you could sense that. And I think for a lot of Black and brown people, we kind of went in with, you know, this is our trauma. We are not prepared now to be discussing our trauma in order to teach people about racism.
Yeah.
And I think because that was the narrative even before we were asked, I think a lot, like even within Salad as well, I think they were very cautious not to do that. So obviously we were part of the conversation, but they were very, you know what I mean? They kind of went out their way to be like, well, okay, we're going to bring in an organisation that deals with this, and then sort of set up talks and things like that. So I think they were very kind of like, you know what I mean, cautious not to be like, because you are the, you know what I mean, the Black person in the organisation, we're expecting you now to fix it. Because I think, you know, I spoke to quite a few people and made it very clear that it's not our problem to fix.
Yeah, and I think a lot of, I think from the outside of all of us consuming different, you know, even stuff like Nike or whatever, like we saw a lot of companies coming out being like, oh, we are also not racist, just to let you know at this time. And it's like so many statements and so many, you know, posts and things and all the solidarity and stuff. And I'm like having conversations with people as well is like that fell from the people that I spoke to, like it fell on a lot of them who it's more of an insult, you know, when it's like, not only do you have the responsibility on you to help us to look not racist, but it's like, this is also something that we've been talking about for years and you haven't listened until now. And now you want to come to us and say, oh yeah, that thing that you guys always complain about, like, help us fix it. And it's like, so I guess, you know, that's a good sign, at least from Sadler's, that it didn't, you know, do that. Because I definitely have friends that have said the opposite, that they did get.
I mean, there was definitely frustration because even with bringing in an external organisation to kind of speak about these issues, there is still this feeling of, you kind of think, but we've been talking about this for years.
Yeah.
And it takes for you to bring someone else in, or for this to happen, and also to bring someone else in to be like, now we're going to start this conversation. So it's kind of hard because, I mean, I'm speaking for myself, but there's this thing of where you're like, this is overwhelming and I don't want to be speaking about this every day. But also if I'm in this, you know what I mean? If I'm in this position, I have to be part of the conversation.
Yeah.
So I do have to speak about it. So I think it's almost just like navigating when it is that I just need to take time out, or when I'm not prepared to be part of this, but also knowing that you do have to be part of the conversation for things to change.
Yeah, I guess also it's like, in a way that's what I guess Black people have wanted, is to be heard and to speak about this on a global scale. But then it's just, by the time it came around, I can imagine being so tired that it's like, yeah, this is what I wanted, but like, it's tiring now to do it. Like, we've been talking about it for so long and not being heard, that now when you say, all right, now we're down, it's like, I guess we won, but
and it's always it's in the middle of a like COVID, so you're also, it's almost this thing of like, I'm dealing with this like everyone else is dealing with this other thing, and now, do you know what I mean? It's almost that thing of like, every day I'm Black, so every day I'm facing something, and it's almost that thing, I just want to be like everyone else, where it's just like, all I'm dealing with is my life, kind of thing. So,
and I think also like you know, this is the same sort of thing that we talk about with hip hop, I guess, and you know, especially for myself, like being, or classing myself as like a guest in the culture, is like, we have to be very aware that it's if the proverbial shit hits the fan, we can turn it off.
Yeah.
Whereas a black person can't turn it off. So these people can choose to come into work and talk about racial issues. And if they get tired of it, they can just stop.
Yeah.
Whereas like you might not have that luxury to be able to stop talking about racial issues because it's what you live with. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think it's also, that's another layer of sensitivity that people have to have, I guess,
Yeah.
you know, especially in organizations where it's like, this isn't just a work program. This
Yeah.
isn't just like,
Yeah.
you know, if I'm working with safeguarding with children,
Yeah.
it's like I don't have kids, so when I go home I can stop talking about kids. Like, do you know what I mean? But yeah, so I guess like my question broadens now into like your experiences in the whole industry, like let's say pre George Floyd resurgence of this movement, I guess. Because I guess, you know, people would say, and you know, you said that there's not a lot of black women leaders in the industry.
Yeah.
So how and why did you get there? Was there like was it more like certain people helped you, or was it more you're so dope that you rose above other people or like against all odds kind of thing? Or what was how do you see that journey for you?
I don't know. I mean, you know, Breakin Convention is almost like its little bubble within a wider organization. So I think because we were, like John Z was allowed the freedom to kind of just, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Create Breakin Convention as it is to a certain extent. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's times when I kind of feel that it's, you know what I mean? Being part of a bigger organization has its pluses and it has its minuses. So you are in a safety net because you're in an organization, but it's almost that sometimes you feel a bit like your wings are being clipped.
Right.
Because you can't just soar how you want to soar. But, you know, to a certain level of degree, we've got quite a lot of freedom. So it's almost like we were allowed to, you know, develop and employ the kind of people that we wanted to and you know what I mean, within the organization, like grow how we wanted to grow as far as the infrastructure of, you know what I mean, who works there.
Yeah.
And then even, I guess, in the very beginning, you know, the support, like someone like Emma, who was the general manager at the time, I think half of the, I'm going to go back and forth because I think half of the problem sometimes being in the arts or being in these organizations is that they will say that they want diversity and then someone will come in. But if I've not come from that kind of like structure or I'm not part, you know what I mean? I'm not middle class white.
Right.
So, and I've not kind of, as much as I like the arts, I'm not well versed on like Pina Bausch and all of these like contemporary names. And to be truthfully honest, I'm not that interested. It's not like I want to know to know in particular. It's like I can watch something and appreciate it and be like, yeah, I appreciate it, but I don't need to know the in-depths, you know what I mean, whatever about this work.
Which incidentally is probably how a lot of contemporary choreographers and artists feel about hip hop.
Yeah.
They're probably like, yeah, it's cool, but over there it's fine, whatever. I'm doing my thing.
But the only difference with that is that a lot of the time when they think, well, I don't need to learn about hip hop, they have this kind of preconception about hip hop of, oh, it's just this street thing. Yeah. Except for when they want to obviously use hip hop and not claim it. But that's another thing.
Another podcast for another day.
That's another thing. But you know, the difference is that I think a lot of the time, because, you know, this kind of like structure has been set up in a sense of contemporary or ballet or whatever is high art. There's always this almost this level of respect. Even if I don't particularly like it or want to know about it, I'm respectful of it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Even if it's not my cup of tea, I am respectful. And I think that's the difference sometimes in when people then look at hip hop in the theatre. It might be like, well, it's not my cup of tea, but also it's not all that. It's not the same as, you know, it's not proper art, is it? Kind of thing. But then going back to like people even kind of getting their foot in the door, and if they're not from that kind of like theatre background, or they don't, you know, they're not well spoken, or they're not well versed on contemporary and ballet and whatever else, it's almost like you're in this kind of club where you feel almost like an imposter.
Yeah.
So even going back to how I felt, whatever, there's times, even now, there's times I kind of feel like this isn't my world. I'm just not part of this world kind of thing. I don't do all the jargon, the speak, and also I don't want to, you know what I mean? I just don't want to.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that's a part of the problem. That's part of the barrier. And I remember having a conversation, and it was about, kind of like integrating. And, when sometimes we have these conversations like, oh, well, we want to do this as, even as Breaking Event, we want to do this, and we want to kind of work with these people, or we want to go and work with these other theatres or whatever it is. And it was this thing of like, yeah, but it should be about integrating. It shouldn't be about being separate. And it's not necessarily about being separate, but even my question then was like, but integrating on whose terms? Because as soon as you're in a theatre, I mean, we face it, is like you deal with, people that are coming into a theatre space. And obviously within Breakin Convention, we have like international artists. So like you have French artists, and they're so kind of like technical, and it's like shows like this, lighting's like this, and music's like this, the whatever, they just know their ish. Yeah. And then even some other kind of like, especially like in Europe, where it's, the arts are so much like better funded and whatever else. And hip hop work is also kind of, they have to mix it a bit more with contemporary, but it's still kind of, there's more platforms for it in the theatre space. So, so we work with hip hop artists from one end of the scale to the other. You have people that come in and they're used to like, we've just done a few shows in like this like sports hall or whatever it is, and we're used to having sort of like 20 minutes tech, and now we're like, okay, you can have an hour and a half, and have you got a tech plan, and have you got this, and have you got that? And they're just like, no, you know what I mean? Like, they don't know what to do because they haven't got a clue of how to do a tech thing. And then it's been like, oh, but your artists don't know what they're doing, or they're not professional. And it's like, well, of course they're not. They've not gone to, you know what I mean? A contemporary conservatoire. You know what I mean? They've not gone through that process. They've not had that training. They've not been privy to that. The same way of like when it's like, we want to be like, okay, we want to bring in this in the building, or we want to do things like this, or we're not planning. We can't just plan and program something 18 months in, advance, because the show's not been made yet. You know what I mean? The show's probably been made like 2 weeks before the performance. So it's just that different culture, but also being kind of like, do you know what I mean? Just being a bit more open to like, this is a different culture, and how do we meet you halfway, rather than this is how things operate in a theatre, and this is how you have to be when you come into a theatre. Yeah,
and I guess this is kind of my question mark over stuff like hip hop theatre, where it's like, are we, and you can answer on behalf of Breakin Convention, but this is more of just a general wondering I have. It's like, are we more theatre that is inspired by hip hop, or are we more hip hop in the theatre? So, because I know a lot of people that, I think the when we talk about hip hop theatre, it's such a massively wide range, and I've had conversations at Artists for Artists about this recently. But there's some people that I think view hip hop theatre as like, literally, we need to bring the culture as is and just put it on stage for people to view. Yeah. And then there's other people that are like, I want to do the format of like what contemporary dance is kind of thing, but just using hip hop structures or influences or that type of thing. Because if you look at, I'm trying to think who I've seen, maybe like Wang Ramirez or someone like that. It's like, that's not so much like, oh, I'm a b-boy on the street and I'm just showing you how cool it was in the 80s. Like, that's like, could almost be contemporary dance. And I think maybe that's why they go more in that realm. And then you've got other things where it's like a lot of Breakin Convention stuff where I see people where it's like literally like what you were saying, these guys are just literally like b-boys that perform in their local sports hall or whatever, and they're just taking what they do to entertain crowds on the street or whatever for street shows and sticking it on the stage. So I guess it's like,
but just to stop you, Breakin Convention is all of it.
Yeah, exactly. And this is what I mean, where it's like I've seen both at Breakin Convention, like. And this is what I guess what you were describing with having the professional, like, let's say like French artists, like you were saying, or the like completely brand new people who don't know what they're doing on the same stage. And that's why it's such a range for you guys. Yeah. And that's what I get a sense of, like, I think that's what I loved when I first went to watch Breakin Convention, you know, like in 2007, it was like, oh, there's my friend and there's someone I've idolized, like in the same stage, one after another. And I'm like, this is so weird. Like, and it almost gave me the belief of like, oh, I could be on that stage. It made me feel like the gap was way less because you were sharing a stage. You know, it was like I was going to watch Bird Gang, the BirdNet show. And that was like one of my big inspirations when I first started. And I was like, oh, like I know Sim, that like
Yeah.
he taught me a routine last week. I know Ivan or whatever. And then the next it was like, I don't know who was there, like Salah was there that year or something like that. Like, and I was like, holy shit, like maybe it's not that of a big gap. Maybe if I can get to that level, then I can get to that level. Like, and it gave me a bit of belief.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really good thing. But I guess when we talk about hip hop theater, I guess it's like, where do we want to sit as a culture? Like, are we trying to, like you were saying, integrating on whose terms? I guess it's like, do we want to integrate our culture into the existing structures and keep it as a separate expression of hip hop culture? You know, like, I guess it's a similar conversation that people are having about breaking being in the Olympics, that it's not turning breaking into an Olympic sport. It's just one expression of breaking can be an Olympic sport. And I guess, are we, you can, you know, give your view. I'm not necessarily asking you, I'm just wondering out loud, but like, are we trying to like make hip hop theater, that's the new culture, and we're trying to push it in and say our culture can survive on these stages as well? Or are we trying to say our culture still exists in this place, it still exists here, and it's going to exist in a different format on the stage? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So that's pretty big.
Yeah.
I mean, I think hip hop, I mean, Johnsy uses this kind of term of like hip hop is the contemporary dance. Because if we think of, you know what I mean, the word contemporary, of what it means, it means of the, you know what I mean, the now,
Of
the
the
new.
now, yeah.
And hip hop is always evolving. So to kind of even pigeon, you know what I mean, to even kind of give it that kind of parameters, like it has to be this, or it has to be this, or it has to be this. It's all of those things, and it's always changing. So, you know what I mean? I think we shouldn't really look at it in the sense of it has to be this in order to be in this stage. And I think even with Breakin Convention, we've continuously shown that. And I guess there was quite a few things that you were saying that, like, even when you were saying, oh, looking at the stage and seeing this person, but then also thinking, you know, this can be me, or it's not that hard, I can do this. And the amount of people, obviously, in 17 years that I've come across that are like, I decided to form my company because I came to Breakin Convention, and that brings us so, you know what I mean? It's just like, wow. But even obviously throughout the years, just seeing the level of the UK, like how it's risen, like on a technical level, on creating, you know what I mean? Just technical as far as just skills, but also in creating theatre work.
Yeah.
So I think I think hip hop is so open. I think it's always been pretty open when you think of like culturally, you know what I mean? Who's in here, you know what I mean? Like you look at like racially, you know what I mean? It's just like backgrounds, it's just so open. Whereas a lot of other cultures, you know, when it comes to arts and what, are not necessarily as open.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I agree. And do you think that, you know, all these things in terms of, you know, what we were saying about inspiring kind of people to be able to achieve these things, like because I think you're quite an inspiring person. And I think, you know, especially the story of you getting to where you're at and kind of working with these organizations, especially what we were saying about, you know, being a black woman in these things is more rare. Do you feel like you want more people to, like, because I would be like, I want to tell everyone, like, you know, I want to tell everyone that Michelle's doing this and that, and like kind of shout about it in the same way that, you know, we would shout about all the acts that are on the stage, so that, you know, more people could you know, be inspired to do the same thing. Like, do you even think there's a need? Do you think there's a lack of black women across the board in these things? And do you think that, or is it something that you take on of trying to like encourage more people? Or
I think probably not actively enough. I mean, obviously I believe that in anything representation is important.
Yeah.
So probably not enough, but then also I think that's down to I'm quite reserved in nature.
Yeah.
In nature. So I'm not necessarily that person that'd be like, I need to be shouting out from the rooftop that, like, you know, this is me, this is what I do, and whatever else. But it's definitely important. It's definitely important that people know, just for the thing of like, yeah, I can do this too. And I can, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I can definitely be in that position.
But do you, all right, let's put it this way as well. How would you, because I feel like the way you described it, you had a bit of an umbrella in the sense of like, Johnsy created this kind of bubble, and then because that bubble almost shielded you from the usual expectations or kind of community that you said that it was hard to break into. It allowed you to actually shine for who you were.
Yeah.
Because they weren't saying like, oh, you don't sound like us, you don't come from the same background. So you could actually show that you were dope. So I guess do we need, what comes first? It's the chicken or the egg thing. Do we need more women in the industries, or do we need more people in the organizations to create the umbrellas for these women to show, or whether it's women or black people or whatever?
I think throughout it's always going to be, you can have people in the sense of like, all right, we're going to have more black and brown people. But another thing, which is kind of when it comes to kind of like systemic racism and whatever else, that is so deep. You know what I mean? I've been having obviously these conversations a lot with just various people, but you can have black and brown people, but not all black and brown people are equal. Right. It's like not all people are equal. Yeah. So it's that thing of like, you can have people in position, and because of just the way things are, there's black and brown people that might think, well, I want to be so far removed from this so-called cause. I don't, it's like when people say, well, I don't want to speak about racism, or I just kind of ignore it, because if you just want to get ahead, you can just get ahead, and have this kind of like notion of like, there are these, you know what I mean? It's almost like these things that people say that hold them back don't exist. Right. And there are things that are barriers, definitely. So sometimes they might not be fighting for the cause.
So they can get someone that looks like you, but doesn't have any of the fight in them. They're just along for the ride. So I guess...
Or not even for along the ride, but they're just wanting to fit in with...
right.
I want to aspire to whatever, you know what I mean, this position is, and that's it. And they're not even trying to be like, I'm now opening the door, or I'm, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So I guess like, often when we talk about diversity and stuff, we say like, if you look at the board of directors of Nike or Adidas or something, like how many of them are black or brown, how many of them are women? Should we actually be saying how many of them are being active?
Yeah.
Like, because
the thing is, you can have a white person that's more of an ally, that is fighting for the cause more than just having someone because they're black or brown.
Yeah. And I think that this is often where I hear, like, let's say like diversity hires in air quotes being questioned, because it's like, what use is it to just pick a random black person and be like, you're the new manager? It's like, if we don't know if they're fighting for the cause, if we don't know what their priorities are, it's like, what's the end goal? Is it to have like loads of different color people on? And that's definitely something, because then just from an outside perspective, looking at it,
representation is important. So even if you don't know what they're doing, it's still that thing of like, okay, I would feel comfortable to go there. So even if I am them fighting for the cause, it would still give me more incentive to be like, I could fit in there because there are people that look like me.
But then I guess the other layer under that is like, right, you've got this board of directors that are, all different races and all different genders and all different ethnicities. I said that twice, and then now it's like, okay, but what are they doing? Like that's, I guess, the second layer.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. I want to, if it's all right with you, make a phone call.
Okay, sure.
We might have someone on the line. But no, we wanted to get a perspective from someone else. So let's see how this works, because this is a new feature of the Duke London podcast. We haven't done this before. So we're just going to see if we hear a ringing sound. Oh, shit. Imagine she doesn't pick up. That'd be great. She's like, oh, sorry, I was just in the shower.
She's expecting this call, right?
Yeah, she is.
Hello.
Hello, can I speak to Paige?
Yes, you're through.
Hello.
I sound like I'm on the radio right now.
Yeah, I'm doing my radio voice. This is Drive Time with Luke Lentis, bringing you all the smooth jazz hits. How are you, Paige?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good. As I think you already know, this is Luke from the Duke London podcast officially. I'm here with Michelle Norton.
Michelle.
Hi, Paige.
Hi.
Breakin Convention. We've just been having some wonderful chats.
Love it.
So let's introduce you to the listening audience at home. Tell us a bit about you, Paige.
A bit about me. Where do I begin? I am a producer.
Yes.
At the moment, I'm working with Impact Dance.
Cool.
That is my we're going into our third year with the company.
Oh, wow.
I'm also one of the company directors.
Mm-hmm.
And alongside that, I also have my own podcast with two friends, just kind of talking about everything at the moment, music, performances, things that are happening in society, just kind of giving ourselves that platform as Black women to kind of use our voice in another way, basically.
Amazing. And Paige, I have two things. First thing is I want you to shout out your podcast so anyone listening can go and check it. But secondly, half of my reason for wanting you to shout out the podcast is because the name of your podcast is so sick. And I want you to tell everyone the name of your podcast.
Yes, the podcast is Litty Committee. That is it. Like, and it's exactly what it says on the tin.
I love that so much.
The name wasn't even given, like, we didn't make it up ourselves. It was actually given to us by Hakeem himself.
That's actually sick.
Yeah, through his the Escape Dance Holiday.
Yeah.
You know, there's dance involved, but there's also parties, and he's just like, the three of you lot are just mad. You lot are the Litty Committee. And we just kind of took it and ran with it. And we're like, you know what?
Yeah.
Litty Committee, that is it. That's the podcast, that's the brand, that's the name, that is everything.
When I was going through my notes, like, that stood out to me. So I was like, that is the sickest name for a podcast. Okay, so that's awesome. And yeah, we're just actually the reason we chose to call you at this point, we were just having some conversations surrounding Michelle being a successful Black woman in the hip hop industry, and especially in the kind of, I guess, more leaning towards the institutionalized side of hip hop, I would say.
Yeah.
Did you have any thoughts on the topic?
It's just kind of like, you know, as someone who's been in the industry for a long time and you really worked your way up, what was it like when you started as a Black woman in this industry? And what is it like now? What are the differences?
Okay. So as I was mentioning, my kind of a journey in Breakin Convention was as a volunteer. And Breakin Convention, first of all, kind of took me back to being around hip hop in the 80s when I first discovered, well, not first discovered, because I first discovered it in the 70s with Sugar Hill Gang, but in the 80s. So I was kind of in a bubble. I was just allowed to kind of just be in Breakin Convention and just be around hip hop culture, which was which I was used to. I think once we became an all round sort of like organization within Sadler's Wells, then you start to kind of see some kind of differences, because then you're kind of like in these bigger internal meetings and you feel different. It is this thing. I mean, I liken sort of like being Black in the UK of how you adapt to then being hip hop in an organization, how you adapt.
Yep.
So I'd like to, well, what's changed? I don't think enough has changed, if I'm honest. You know, I think for how long we've kind of been there, I think, you know, obviously we've seen the progress of like hip hop platforms, as far as there's more MPOs, there's more, you know, there's more shows being programmed, but there's still not enough for the kind of like richness that we bring. There's not enough. And I think like for the last couple of years, we've been saying it needs to get to a point of where when venues are programming hip hop, that it's not seen as like, oh, we've done our one hip hop show for the year. They should be looking at, when they're programming hip hop, that if they've programmed like 2,300 contemporary shows and ballet, they should be looking at hip hop in the same way. It shouldn't be like, oh, is this a hip hop program? It should be like, it's this dope show that we've programmed and it's hip hop.
I actually have a question for both of you guys on that. Do you think, because I think, you know, this is the thing about, let's say, I'm not specifically talking about like Black women in hip hop, but more like hip hop as a culture and being included in these institutions. One thing I always think is like, I would love that as well, that like they don't just think of the one or the two. But do you think within our culture and within our practices, we have a high enough level to warrant that at this point?
We do. We don't have enough investment.
Do you think?
That's the problem.
In terms of the progress of the artists, or because like if you were to take like let's say the 10 best hip hop theatre pieces at the moment compared to the 10 best contemporary pieces in the UK, would you see a level difference in like how good and how well structured they are and how, you know, artistically good the piece is? And do you think that that's more like, I guess what you're saying with investment is because the artists themselves haven't been invested in to raise their level? Or is it the pieces are there, but they're just not being picked up?
I think the level, I mean, in for our 10th anniversary, we programmed the Monday night, we programmed and commissioned and programmed 10 UK pieces.
Yeah.
So that whole night, that whole program was led by UK artists. So there's definitely enough. And as I said, you know, obviously over the years, we've seen the level of like technical skill develop. And I think that is a mixture. I mean, we even noticed it in the first couple of years because it was that thing of like having UK artists that were maybe just 2 years into their practice being on the stage with all of these international renowned like artists that have been doing this for how many years. So we've seen the levels improve. But also when you look at if one company's getting 300,000 to create a piece and then another company's getting 30,000, you're going to see the difference. When someone's got 10 weeks of R&D to develop a piece and someone else has only got 2 weeks, you're going to see the difference. So it's investment. It boils down to investment.
Yeah, and I guess it's like...
the talent is there.
The comparison being like, you know, Kendrick Lamar's an amazing artist, but he's an amazing artist because of partly because of all the money that's put in to give him the time and the energy and the resources to create.
There's a machine behind him.
Exactly. Yeah.
How
do you see it from your perspective, Paige?
Personally, I think it's a bit of both. There's that whole thing of with more, I'm trying to think of the word, kind of in white establishments, let's just go with that.
Yeah.
There's that whole thing of like you're vying for potentially that one hip hop space.
Right.
So you only need to get it to a certain level. I feel like it's kind of the energy. You only need to get it to a certain level, and whatever we do, they're going to think that it's good.
Yeah.
Whereas if you feel like you're competing against more of your peers, you're going to elevate yourself that much more. And I think there needs to be more of that, so that with things like Breakin Convention and platforms like that, they know, okay, we have to bring a certain standard, because if we don't, we're not going to be part of the show.
Right. So I guess if you're one piece out of 10 that does hip hop and everything else is contemporary, it's almost like, oh, that's cute. Like, oh, you did your cool hip hop thing. Whereas if it's 10 hip hop pieces, now we're watching the whole show for its artistic merit, and we're looking and saying, right, okay, yeah, cool. They're all cool hip hop and they're all exciting, but which is the good ones and which is the ones that we like and that type of thing.
Yeah, there's more analysis. There's, you know, potential ranking of favorites and things like that. There's more that goes behind it. I think if you're on a roster with more people that you know, more people in your community.
Yeah, I agree. So Paige, how do you actually? I'm going to turn your question back on you. Like, how do you see kind of from where you are in the industry, like kind of how it is to be a Black woman in the industry? Like, do you see a different world than Michelle would maybe see?
I think similarly, I am in a bubble. Through Impact, there is that semblance of that kind of cushion, being that, you know, Hakeem is this figurehead that kind of knows everybody. I've been able to kind of maneuver and navigate in a different way. But as a Black woman, I'm not seeing that many people that are like me.
Right.
And even when it started out, like I started as trainee producer at the place on the Changemakers program alongside Hakeem. And my whole thing, for like even down to my name, my mum was like, I don't want you to sound Black on paper. Yeah. So there was this whole notion behind, oh, you turn up and, oh, it's a Black woman. Okay, cool.
Right.
There's different energy that comes behind it. And you know, when you're doing certain shows and you're communicating with people via email or over the phone, and then you turn up and there's a Black face there, there's still that you can kind of, they try and diminish it, but you can see there's a level of shock there.
Yeah.
And I feel like the shock factor needs to be removed. And it shouldn't be too much of a thing that we're even going to that extent to, oh yeah, we must hire a person of color that is also a woman. It's just very, when you go to that extent sometimes to be inclusive, it's just like you're ticking a box when that should be the fabric and fiber of your organization.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like it's there yet.
Definitely.
And even within some of these organizations, women might be in there, but what where does your voice sit? How much weight does your voice carry in those spaces?
Yeah. Like if
I
you're
think
there
is
as maybe
another
like
question.
a token kind of, we've got a black woman. She just sits in the back of the office.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, I think some people feel like that's enough.
Right.
I think this past year with, you know, Black Lives Matter kind of like heightening everyone and making people turn the lens on their organizations and people being like, okay, you market yourself towards this demographic of people. What does your team look like?
Yeah, yeah.
And then you see the percentages and it's like, oh, okay, you've got 3% people of color. And even the grouping of people of color in itself is like, come on.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be like that. There needs to be more of a spread to even get more voices or clarity on those voices in these spaces.
Yeah. You know what I find interesting as well is like, if you, just for anyone listening, like, can you tell us about the Changemakers program?
Yeah, so the Changemakers program...
Because that's like where you got your break, isn't it, kind of?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was a national project and it's basically for an individual to partner with an organization.
Okay.
And through that, it was 18-month project to be in those spaces and acquire the skills that they needed to go on and be like an executive in another organization or take the skills that they learn and apply it to their own business.
Yeah.
And as part of that, Hakeem and Eddie Nixon from The Place devised that they wanted to bring on trainee producers.
Right.
And that's where I came in.
Yeah.
And it was a thing of like, when I saw even the application, it was, BAME applicants, not required, but, you know, you'd have a bit of a leg up. And it was one of those that I'm just like, oh, here we go with this BAME thing again. But I was also like, you know what, Paige, let's play the game.
Right.
Let's play the game. Let's see how, if you apply for this, how is this going to, you know, put your foot in the door that much more to get you to where you want to go? Because there is still that thing of, you know, making it in this industry still for a lot of people is, oh, you've worked with this person or you've worked within this organization. It's the name that carries a lot of weight. So that was my thing with there. And I had kind of heard about Hakeem through that. And I was like, you know what? To work alongside someone as a proper mentor, not just being their assistant and it's like, okay, you're running to get this or you're doing that. No, a mentor as in I can sit down with you and have full-on conversations.
Yeah.
At that point, I was like, that's what I needed. I needed that training in the field, basically.
Yeah.
And I was there for 8 months. And once that was up, Hakeem just turned around to me and said, you know what? You've moved on like leaps and bounds since you started here. Do you want to come and be the producer for Impact Dance?
Amazing.
And I was just like, it was a no-brainer because as well as getting, you know, the training and the learning and all of that, it felt like family.
Yeah.
Really and truly, like I cannot, from when I met him officially in 2017, I feel like I haven't looked back.
That's nice.
Which is crazy.
Yeah. So do you think that things like Changemakers, where maybe in that application they were kind of leaning towards the, like, in air quotes, the BAME demographic, is that, do you think, kind of where we should maybe focus more of our energy as an industry rather than, I mean, me and Michelle were just kind of talking about, again, in air quotes, like diversity hires, where it's like, you know, we just want someone that looks different on the panel. But maybe, I guess, is it more valuable to invest time building these skills in people so that, you know, people like yourself who are great at what they do can be given a chance to shine and be like, yeah, look, like you gave me a chance. Look how dope I am. Now you actually want me in your organization. But, you know, if they hadn't done that, they might have just gone with their same old pool of hiring, which was, you know, these white people from a certain background, you know? Yeah, I think, you know, it definitely serves its purpose, but I also feel like it comes down to which are the people involved making these decisions. Like, what's the partnership? In terms of like the organization being the place in this instance, kind of being ready to be like, okay, let's shake things up. The whole program is called Change Makers. Make the change. If you're not willing to do that, what's the point? And Hakeem kind of being at that stage in his career where it was like, you know what, we have to shake things up. Enough is enough. And him kind of being ready to be like, you know what, nah, that is the person that I want. That is this, that is that. Because I think it was between me and somebody else. And I think
the place wanted to go with the other person.
Oh, wow.
And Hakeem was like, no.
But he didn't know
Go with
you?
Paige. No.
Oh, wow, great. So he was already vouching for you.
He was like, go with Paige. She's the one that I know that she's not this or she's not that, but that one is going to be good. And just that you need people in those spaces to be like, yeah, they might not be perfect, but to take the chance on people.
Amazing, yeah.
I don't feel like a lot of organizations are ready to take a chance.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that's a good message, is like taking a chance on more people, because there are, and it's not just like hire anyone from the job who's a black woman. It's like, if you take the chance and look, there are brilliant black women out there, Yeah. Especially if you invest time and energy into training them and helping them grow, like Johnsy did with Michelle, and like Hakeem
Emma
did with
and
you.
Johnsy, yeah.
Sorry, Emma and Johnsy. But then it's like, even to the extent that it's like Hakeem was like, oh no, you're actually like, I want you. I want to hire you afterwards,
Exactly.
That's great. Yeah.
Exactly
no, Paige, super appreciate you joining us and your input. Give us a shout out one more time. Where can people find your podcast? So
we are on Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts, and it's all under Litty Committee Podcast.
Litty Committee, the best podcast name. I haven't heard anything better so far. I'll let you know if I hear any name that I like better, but that's my favorite podcast name so far.
Love it. Amazing.
No, thank you so much. And guys, your Paige's like social media will be up on the screen if you're watching. So yeah, go and check her out. Contact her if you need anything, because she's awesome.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Thanks,
Bye,
Paige.
See you. Bye.
Bye.
Oh, that's a cool new feature of the podcast. That was fun to give it a try.
Yeah, that's good.
No, it's super nice to hear from Paige. Yeah, it's interesting what you're saying. I'm just kind of reflecting now. But do you like these conversations that we're having, do you find that these conversations are had a lot? Like, do you feel like we're not having enough of these conversations? Where do you see these like, is it just because sometimes I think with conversations like this, it's like the people that have them the most are the people that don't need to be having them. You know what I mean? It's like the people that aren't having them are the ones that need to be having them.
Yeah.
But I guess you move in different circles than maybe I would, or maybe even Paige would at this point. So can you give us any insight? Like, are people having these conversations? Do you still think it's a bit of radio silence?
I think a lot of it, as you said, is the people that don't necessarily need to be. You know what I mean? We're just talking amongst the converted a lot of the time. And then I know, like, even with me within Saddlers Wells and just how I am, I speak to, you know what I mean, the kind of like senior people. I have individual conversations where I'm just blatant and, you know what I mean, and just frank. But I just think even the wider conversations aren't being had. And it's almost like even after everything happened with the George Floyd stuff, and there was like task force set up within Saddlers Wells amongst the associate artists. So there's that group, and then there's obviously there was always a kind of like equality and diversity kind of steering group, but there's all these separate kind of conversations, and it almost feels like even just going by, I'm going to tie this into COVID now,
that's cool.
But even just like I took a walk yesterday and going past the bus stops, and even like being in the studio here, everywhere you walk around now, all you see is COVID, or do this because of COVID, do this. Even when things don't necessarily relate, they'll kind of fit it into, I saw, the posters the other day, yesterday that I saw at the bus stop were like, so-and-so's giving blood, and they're wearing a mask. And it was like, it's talking about giving blood, but all right, we got to put in. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I was
buy our new Big Mac because of COVID.
And I was thinking, just imagine if before COVID we were putting like every time we walked on the street and we saw like advertisements was about loving, you know what I mean, your equality or loving your fellow neighbor or whatever it is, and kind of like preaching love and equality and just being good people. What that would do to your psyche, because what this is doing to our psyche isn't good, but we're just, our attention is on it, and that's all we're thinking of. So in the same way that, we can have conversations, but if we're having all of these kind of silo conversations here and there, and it's not in everything, nothing is going to change.
Yeah.
So like if we're having a conversation about the program, we need to be talking about equality. If we're having a marketing conversation, we need to be talking about equality and the balance. Everything needs to be where we're always talking about. And I know there's sometimes people like, oh, can we stop talking about equality or race or whatever? But we have to.
Yeah.
We have to keep talking about it, because it's easy to be like, as you said, I can have this conversation and you could be really empathetic and be like, oh, that's really bad. That's what's happened to you. But then you go back, as you said, you go back to your family and it's just like, I don't need to think about this. And I can just kind of like, just leave it out there. Whereas if we're constantly talking about it, then something has to, you know what I mean? Something has to give. So it's not. So to answer your question, no, we're not talking about it. No.
in a word.
Yeah.
No, and I think also it's like we see the difference when it is happening, because I guess since, the summer or like the second half of 2020, I would say, all these companies got involved, right?
Yeah.
And reason we can be skeptical or not about the reasons why, because they just want to make money or whatever, and it's the popular thing. But I think seeing that everywhere has kind of helped a lot.
Yeah.
Regardless of the meaning behind it. Like when Nike endorsed Kaepernick, did you see all that? Like, it's like, we can separate the conversation. Like, yes, maybe they endorsed him just because they could make more money by looking woke and all that, right? But the fact that his face was on a big poster and he was being idolized as a hero, it changes the narrative, So whatever the reasons are, I agree with you. Like, if this was plastered more, if we had more of heroes like Kaepernick and people like that, it's we're walking down the street and we're just seeing it all the time. Like, we're like, oh, that guy's really cool because he was in Quentin Tarantino's movie. That guy's really cool because he was on Love Island. That guy's really cool because he took a knee and protested the flag. It's like, it's just part of the conversation of like what's important in life. And I think it is true. But I guess it's, until something like big happens like that.
Of course, something has to trigger something. We have to have triggers.
Yeah. And I think I've heard a lot of conversations, which I think is an interesting point. I don't necessarily have an answer, but that when these companies and people, like institutions, will be moved when the money's affected. Like when Nike thought that you would stop buying their clothes until they said something. And that's why a lot of these companies came out, because I think a lot of us were, or a lot of people were like looking and going, well, you haven't made a statement about Black Lives Matter, which I don't necessarily agree that they should just do it because they feel forced, and they're like, oh yeah, buy our products now, we super care, like we're Lush, buy our bath bombs because we care about black people. Like, it's a bit ungenuine, or whatever that word is. But I think again, splitting the conversation, it is when you start to affect their money, things will start to change. So in that way, it's like, these, I guess, the boycotts or whatever, these things can have an effect, I guess.
But you have to. It's almost like the revolution. You know what I mean? You have to start the revolution to create change. So you know what I mean? By all means necessary, whatever we need to, you know what I mean? Do to make that change.
Yeah, for sure.
So
and I think like especially like public conversations help a lot. And that's my thing with the podcast in all different areas, not just like race or whatever. But like having a public conversation is different to like me and you. We could have the same conversation alone, but here it's like people will, like, I mean, I don't have the hugest following yet, but the more public conversations you have, the more people know that the conversations are happening, and they feel that pressure of like, okay, maybe I should have an opinion on this because I might get questioned about it at some point.
Also, it's enlightening other conversations.
Right, yeah, so, exactly. Agree or disagree, there's people that might listen to this and go, I fucking disagree. But fine, like, have your own conversations with it, go and, talk to people. But it's really interesting. I did want to actually get on to also, I don't want to miss out, but like you have a whole other side to your life, which is like fitness. And
freak,
I definitely wanted to like, I didn't have a good segue for it, but like speaking of Nike, you do fitness. But tell me about that, because for me, I'm like, a lot of people I'm around are not narrow-minded in a bad way, but let's say tunnel vision is a bit better in the sense of like, I can imagine a lot of people get into your position and being like, I made it, like, especially if that's what you want to do. Like, your degree was related to that. You were working in Breakin Convention at the beginning. To get to be the head of Breakin Convention is like, I'm here, baby. Like, let's go. But like, you also run like a fitness. Like, tell me everything about the side hustle.
Fitness. I mean, I've always been into fitness. So even from the kind of sense of, I used to be a dancer.
Right.
So before Breakin Convention, before whatever, I used to dance. But I was always into fitness. My mum was into fitness. And then I just kind of got into it into my late teens.
When you say your mum was into fitness, like, did she do it professionally or she
No,
just worked
didn't
out
do
a
it.
lot? Or?
Well, in her kind of like when I was in my younger teens, I saw, you know what I mean? She went to the gym a lot. She was doing weightlifting and people wanted her to do competitions, but she didn't.
Yeah.
So I was kind of like inspired just the fact that she was, you know, my mum.
Yeah.
And I was a teenager and she was really fit.
Yeah.
I was inspired. I say inspired because I used to kind of watch Jane Fonda videos and eat ice cream and crisps while I was watching a video.
Yeah, this looks cool though.
I was kind of inspired.
Yeah.
And then like sort of 18, I just kind of then got into training myself and I would train on and off all through my sort of like 20s. And then obviously I was dancing as well. So then, you know what I mean? I guess my exercise then was just clubbing and dancing.
Yeah.
And then through my 30s on and off, even like when I had my son, I was still kind of training. And then in my 40s, I just really just became like really on it again, like doing
With
sort of...
anything in mind or just to be as fit and healthy as you can?
No, well, I started training with a collective called Block Workout, which was like a community fitness kind of like movement in South London. And just from training with them, it was kind of like that community, like family feeling of just training. I just really got into it. And then just I think it was almost a thing of like you know what I mean? It just triggers your endorphins. Obviously, like training is good for you. So I think with just the stress of sometimes that my job can bring, you know, it's arts, but it's still stressful. It was almost like what kept me sane.
Right. It's like blowing off steam kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it keeps me sane. So I was then doing things like 10-day in a row sort of boot camps, like waking up at 6:30 in the morning and training, then going to work, and then training on Saturdays as well. They did like another session on Saturday. So I really got so you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Ingrained in just training all the time, and then decided in 2014 that I wanted to go and do the training to qualify to be a personal trainer.
Oh, nice.
So did that, was working full time, and then doing that on weekends for like 8 weeks in a row, which was hell.
How old was your son at this point?
24. He would have been 14.
Okay, right.
Yeah, so he was 14.
Yeah.
And since then, just started. I now do classes on. I started doing classes on Tuesday morning in Angel, so I do it before work.
Yeah.
On a Tuesday morning.
Like general workout kind of classes, or
like body weight and and like boot camp sort of training, and then I'd also do some kind of like 5-day in a row boot camps. I was doing had a few clients, but it was quite a lot to be, you know what I mean, juggle around work, having clients. So now I just kind of do the classes, and then obviously since the pandemic, I've kind of like gone to Zoom. So I do like classes on Tuesday and Thursday mornings before work.
Nice. I have to say, like, one thing with the pandemic is everyone's learned to adapt. And well, I mean, not everyone, but a lot of us have learned to adapt. And there's so many things, like, you would have never thought to do a fitness class on Zoom before, but now that you have to, it's like, actually, you know, my question is, I guess, in general, again, is like, how much of this will remain afterwards? Because it's like, if you can do a Zoom class from home, maybe not that's what you would always do, but would you consider like, okay, now I'm back in the gym, I'm allowed to do 2 classes a week. I could do a third one on Zoom and not have to leave the house.
I definitely still would want to do some. I mean, it's the nice thing, obviously, about something like Zoom, because there's a lot of people that used to do class with me, and then when they left Sadler's Wells, they would be like, oh, okay, I've moved now, my job's here, or I live here and I can't come to class anymore. Whereas, you know, there were people even... You know, some people travelling back home. There was people in France doing the class. There's people that live in Brighton. There's people that live in the north of England. There's people all over now that can do class. So I wouldn't stop.
Yeah, I don't
doing
think
an online class, but I would definitely also want to do.
Yeah, to be back in real
person.
life. I think there's a lot of stuff that's going to stay, because even, you know, with dance classes that are online now, it's like, what's to stop? Or even, I guess it's the same with the fitness class. What's to stop you having 30 places in the class and then live streaming it on IG and charging half price for another 30? You know what I mean? It's like
Someone suggested that to me about fitness class, but I know what would happen. It's like I would be making my way to my class, and then I'd have people like, oh, Shell, I'm not coming today because I'm just going to join you on. No.
Yeah, like they'll get lazy.
No.
Yeah.
So I think I'd have to keep them very separate. It's like you either do the online class or I also do one in person. And if I do one in person, that's where you turn up.
So there's no option to just
because believe
to just
me,
stay at home.
I've experienced too much. I mean, people pay and then miss classes for whatever reasons. You know what I mean? So it's just like,
don't give them another one.
no.
That's interesting. Yeah. So actually, I've got one. I don't want to go too much into this topic because we're to the tail end of this. But what would be your view on the like, just as a fitness professional, I guess, like the body positivity kind of movement and like, people being happy in any size. If your kind of goal is, this and helping people to get to their most fit, where do you stand on this kind of the body positivity and like everyone can be happy at every size? And because I guess at some point that becomes unhealthy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
And like, this is kind of my question mark in my head sometimes is like, yes, I agree. If we are happy, we should be allowed to be happy however we look.
Yeah.
But then also, at what point do we say you're unhealthy?
I mean, I get that, and I get it in a sense of that it's also lends to we should be happy with what we have. We should be happy with, you know what I mean? Whatever it is. There's loads of things that I think there's a clear message and positive message in being enough as you are and being good enough as you are. But my thing is that, you can be what looks or appears to be overweight, but you could be quite healthy.
Yes. Yeah.
You could eat quite healthy. You could be training and active, and it depends on what's going on inside your body more than, you know what I mean? The same way that you could be, slender and what looks like you're very healthy because you know what I mean? You haven't got excess pounds, but you're really unhealthy. So to me, it is about health. It's not so much into how someone looks. It's about their health.
So you're fit, when you train people, you would more focus on like, or actually, what would you more focus on? Because I know a lot of people, when you're not a professional, you're just like, I'm working out, my belly's still there. I'm talking about myself now.
Yeah.
But like, I'm like, some people, I'm some people. But like, I guess for you being a professional, so do you more focus on like, how do you feel? How is yours like stamina? Like what sort of,
everyone's different. So the first thing is, when you start training people, it's almost like, what is your, do you know what I mean? What is your goal kind of thing? And for some people, it might be like, I just want to build my strength.
Yeah.
So it's not about that I want a six pack or, do you know what I mean? Like big guns or, you know what I mean? It's like, I just want to improve my strength. Some people, it might be, I want to improve my stamina and endurance. Some people, it might be that I want to whatever. And then you are then going to have to be strict. And, they say like 70 to 80% is diet. So you are going to then be like, okay, I need to look at my diet. I need to look at all of these things. And when am I trying to achieve this by? So it's an individual thing.
Right.
But I think that even if, regardless of whatever, to keep moving, like it's a physical thing, but also it's a mental thing. So training is always going to be good for you, even if that means you just going for a walk every day. It's going to be good for you rather than just not doing anything.
Yeah.
So,
I think also like the reason I ask as well is like I think maybe when I was younger, a lot of the criticism was leveled at like, let's say like the modeling industry of like, oh, you make expectations like this, blah, blah. But now I've started to see it change a little bit. And now where for me, like, I think it's great that fitness has become a trend. People say that in a bad way, but I'm like, that's the best trend that could happen.
Exactly,
what everybody's
it's for
trying
your
to,
health.
and like all these influencers, like people are like, all these influencers are in the gym, like it's like, they're in the gym, like making themselves healthier. Like, how is that a bad thing? But I think I've also seen a lot of people leveling that criticism that used to be on the modeling industry and those like stereotypical skinny models. Now it's like starting to turn towards the fitness industry. Like, you're making me feel like this and that. And like my parents are both athletes, like they're both gymnasts.
wow, yeah.
And so I came from that background of like understanding, I guess, fitness for what it really was, not just like the cover of Men's Health was like this. It was more, I understood strength and stuff like that. So I think for me, I was always like, I don't think that's what the fitness industry are doing. Like, just because this guy has a six pack on Men's Health cover, like that's not, and maybe, maybe it's the marketing side of fitness.
I guess if you're looking at it from the perspective of, Instagram, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's always going to have that kind of connotation with it because Instagram is very much like this look at me platform. So I think that's probably where the criticism is coming from, because it is this thing of like, in the same way that everyone looks at Instagram, it's like, well, I haven't got this car, or I haven't got this house, or I haven't got this, I'm not going on this holiday. So I think that's the danger with that. So I think anything that's kind of pushed on Instagram is always going to have that backlash in the sense of it's not real, and it's also what it says to other people that feel like they're not enough.
Yeah, yeah.
So it will just be one thing. You know, I can turn around and be like, you know, if I'm slim or whatever, I can look at maybe the kind of movement. It's like, oh, you got to be thick, so you got to have a booty out here, and you got to have thighs like this, or you got to have boobs. Do you know what I mean? And be like, well, I don't look like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then also feel insecure in that sense. So I think that's just the danger of Instagram, period. And I think when it comes to, I think, you know, my motto and when it comes to health and whatever else is always kind of like everything in moderation anyway. Right. So I would never sort of turn around, as I was saying to you maybe off air, but sort of saying this thing of like people come to me like, oh my gosh, like, Cheryl, I ate this and I shouldn't be telling you this. And I'm like, you know, it's like, live your life. Do you know what I mean? I don't think anything, it's like everything for you should be like where it's like your lifestyle. It shouldn't be this thing of like, oh my gosh, this is like a chore. I'm having to starve myself to do this, or I'm having to train and I hate it. It's like, find things that you love to be active.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Not everyone is going to want to be in the gym. You know what I mean? If you want to dance, then dance.
Yeah.
That's do you know what I mean? It's exercise. You know what I mean? If you want to go and do climbing, go and do climbing. If you like swimming, you know what I mean? Whatever is going to be for you that is movement and good for your health, then do that. Yeah. And obviously, if you're not taking, you know what I mean? And also, a lot of these people that are like, oh yeah, fitness and I look like this, are getting things done.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So it's not realistic in that sense. It's like,
I guess you have to ask yourself, where are your expectations coming from? Are they external or internal? Because it's like, if you're like, I struggle with this, I think. And like, you know, with fitness wise, it's like, okay, should I be like starving myself and eating like everything that I hate just to like be super healthy? And then I'm like, am I, you know, depressed with the way I look? When I feel in shape, I don't ever have a six pack, but I don't feel horrible when I look in the mirror. And can I do everything that I want to do? If I can do enough dance rounds, if I can complete a whole theatre piece without passing out, like that's my expectation. So anything above that where I'm like, oh, I wish I had a six pack or I wish I had big muscle. It's like, that's not me, because internally I don't believe that. I'm just letting society tell me that that's what I need, I guess.
Also, if you feel shit, you're gonna, you know what I mean? Internalize so many things that on a day that you're feeling good, you're not going to give a shit. You know what I mean? You won't care.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? If you're feeling good and you're hanging out with your loved ones and you're having fun and you're creating memories and whatever else, you're not caring about your gut. Do you know what I mean?
It's when you're in a bad place already.
If you're in a bad place and you're going to be like, this and I haven't done this and I haven't this and I don't look like you. That's when you're going to start, you know what I mean, criticizing yourself. So the secret to fitness is to be happy.
Boom. I'm trying to think. I don't think there's anything else too much, because again, any questions I ask at this point are going to lead to another half an hour conversation, and we don't have all the time. I think we covered a lot of ground. I'm trying to think if there's anything that I'm going to regret not asking you when you leave. I don't think so. But yeah, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Super appreciate your time.
You've broken my podcast cherry.
Yay! It was a wonderful time. And we've been in a few countries together before, and like had a few drinks in in a few after parties and stuff. I
was told by Dave, like, don't go in and start stroking Luke's hair.
You know what? I didn't want to bring that up because I was like, I wonder how professional she wants to be. No, for anyone, did he actually say that? For anyone that doesn't know the story, you can't
go in and stroke Luke's hair.
For anyone that knows me, you'll know this, but like when I have my hair cut really short, it feels wonderful. Like I don't know why, it just feels great to like stroke my hair, even I have to say. And like where country were we in? Luxembourg?
Oh, Luxembourg, yeah.
Yeah, I think we were drunk at that after party, and Michelle must have spent a good 10 minutes just standing having a conversation with someone else, I think, just stroking my hair. And I was just like, this feels nice, so I don't want to leave. And I felt a bit bad to just walk off, so I was just standing there. And it now became a running joke. But if you see me, don't do it now because of Corona. But after Corona's gone, you're welcome to stroke my hair. It feels wonderful. No, but we've had some nice conversations and stuff in various places, but it's nice to actually sit down and have an in-depth chat with you. I think you're wonderful, and
Thank you. It's been lovely talking to you.
Oh, thanks.
I feel comfortable.
You've got me work through Vice, so thank you for paying my rent multiple times. So thanks for being here, and obviously on behalf of Artists for Artists as well, we obviously have to minimize who's here in the studio because of Corona and all the rules and stuff. So Lee and Joseph and Emily couldn't be here. But I'm holding the fort down the fort. Is that an expression? But yeah, so big shout out to Artists for Artists for making this happen.
Yeah.
Just to remind everyone, this is a collaboration with Artists for Artists and myself for our Digital Spring stage. So this will be probably the first of our Digital Spring stage. It's going to be 8 weeks of weekly content. Everything can be found on the website, obviously on all of our socials, but on the Artists for Artists website, www.artistsforartists.co.uk. Got loads of different stuff coming. You're gonna love it. A lot of like different artists than we've worked with before, which is great. A lot of different things like that. Artists for Artists haven't done like a podcast, especially not with me before, so this is cool to do that. It's a few films. We have our digital seed fund, which we put out a commission for a small seed fund for an artist to create something. We won't say too much yet. So you'll see kind of the results of that as part of our spring stage. We're going to have a few different films and stuff like that. But all will be revealed soon, if it hasn't been already, because we're recording this before it's going out. So it may have already been revealed. But yeah, so I will let Michelle go now, because I'm sure you have lots of important things to do.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for listening. Tune in next week. You can find all of my past podcasts on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Music, everywhere basically, except for SoundCloud. For some reason, they don't support SoundCloud. And yeah, the Duke London podcast collaboration with the Artists for Artists, we're going to have another 3 episodes. Beyond that, the Duke London podcast is coming back. We are going behind the scenes to figure out how to make it sustainable, because I've said this so many times, but I don't want to just do Zoom calls from my house unless I absolutely have to. So with Corona, with making it a realistic endeavor for me, where I'm working with like a team to try and kind of come up with how we can make it happen. So yeah, we will be back. So if you listened before, please don't forget about me and leave me and find another podcast that you fall in love with. Please keep me in your heart. And I'll be back. And thanks for listening, guys. See you later.